Welcome to The Explainer. For decades, the story of Elvis and Priscilla Presley has been sold to us as this perfect rock and roll fairy tale. But today, we're going to pull on some of the threads of that story. Because when you actually look at the sources, well, that official version starts to fall apart pretty fast.
And this right here, this is the romantic version we've all been fed, right? Priscilla, just completely blinded by her love for the king of rock and roll. It's an incredibly powerful image, and it's one that has lasted for decades.
But that's the real question, isn't it? Is that the whole story? Because the moment you start digging into the public record, and I mean really listening to the people closest to them, including her own daughter, a very, very different picture starts to emerge. So, to try and piece this all together, we're going to be looking at 4 really key sources. We've got 2 memoirs from Priscilla herself, an investigative biography, and, what might be the most revealing of all, the posthumous memoir from her daughter, Lisa Marie. And here's the thing, when you put them side by side, a really clear pattern starts to show up.
All right, so let's dive right in. We're going to start with the absolute foundational myth of their relationship, the timeline. How it all supposedly began.
Okay, so in her newest memoir, which is coming out in 2025, Priscilla makes this very, very specific claim. She insists that the romance, the real romance, it didn't start until years after they met when she was 17.
But here's where it gets interesting. Investigative biographer Suzanne Finstad, she completely contradicts this. In her book, Child Bride, she basically calls Priscilla's official story an elaborate fiction, one that was built to cover up a much, much darker reality of a young teenager who is essentially isolated at Graceland. And then you have her own daughter, Lisa Marie. And she doesn't pull any punches. In her memoir, she just states it bluntly. Her mom met her dad at 14, and her grandparents, they allowed it. It's just a simple statement of fact. There's no revised timeline, no hemming and hawing.
And this is where you can really see the story changing, right? When you map it all out, the narrative clearly shifts over time. It goes from the story of just pure blinded by love romance to one that actively pushes the timeline forward, almost like it's trying to make that age gap a little more acceptable for a modern audience. And you know what? This exact same pattern pops up when we talk about their physical relationship. Priscilla's claim, the one she's held on to for decades from Elvis and me, is that they waited until their wedding night. But Finstad's investigation? It reports that this was just another crucial piece of that elaborate fiction.
Okay, so let's follow this thread. Let's see how this pattern continues when we shift from the romance to Priscilla's role as a mother.
And this is just a devastating memory that Lisa Marie shares in her posthumous memoir. She actually recalls her mother confessing to her that she considered ending the pregnancy, all because of how it would affect her image as Elvis's wife. I mean, think about that.
And Lisa Marie goes on, saying she always felt like her very existence was, a reluctant decision, not a celebrated one. And this, of course, stands in such stark contrast to the loving, devoted mother persona that Priscilla has built for decades.
There's this other story from Lisa Marie that just perfectly captures this obsession with appearances. She remembers her mom, right after giving birth, fumbling around with false eyelashes because she was so worried about looking absolutely perfect for Elvis. I mean, it seems like a small thing, but it points to this much bigger theme, right? That image often came before reality.
So, this incredible focus on controlling the narrative, it doesn't stop with the birth of her child. Oh no, it continues right on through the divorce and even after Elvis's death, all to shape a very, very specific legacy. Now, Priscilla's official reason for leaving Elvis, it's a story of empowerment, of self-discovery. The line is that she still loved him, but she just needed to find her own identity, to get out from under his shadow. And it's a really compelling, very modern narrative.
But, once again, the source material from Child Bride tells a very different story. Finstad reports that by the time they separated, Priscilla was already involved in an affair, which suggests the split was maybe less about pure self-discovery and a lot more about a new relationship that was already underway.
And maybe the most telling part of this whole thing is what happened after Elvis died. Even though they've been divorced for years, Priscilla fully, and I mean fully, embraced the role of his widow. Finstad doesn't mince words here. She calls it out directly as an opportunistic branding move. So when you just take a step back for a second, you start to see how all these different pieces connect, right? The shifting timeline, the stories about motherhood, the whole narrative around the divorce, they all point to the exact same powerful theme.
I mean, when you lay out all the evidence from these 4 books side by side, the pattern is just undeniable. What you're looking at is a consistent decades-long history of meticulous image management. It's all about rewriting, polishing, and marketing a very specific version of the story.
So in the end, all these conflicting accounts, they just leave the fairy tale of Elvis and Priscilla completely in pieces. And what's left, well, it doesn't really seem like a story about love. It feels much more like a story about a complex, decades-long, and honestly, masterfully executed PR campaign.
And this really leaves us with a final big question about the power of celebrity myth-making, doesn't it? For years and years, only one version of this story was allowed to exist. It took an investigative reporter and, so tragically, her own daughter's words from beyond the grave to even begin to challenge it. It really makes you wonder, right? Whose truth actually gets to become the official one? And what does it take to finally set the record straight?